I am Susan Dennard, which you probably know because you are watching this video on my very humble YouTube channel. But in case you don't know and you've just randomly discovered this video, I'm Susan Dennard, the author of the Something Strange and Deadly series, as well as the currently ongoing Witchlands series, of which the next one comes out in just a few days, and I am very excited for that. Witch comes out February 13th. Before we begin, I feel that I should show you my poster so you don't think I just have this weird lady legs behind me. Yeah, it's a James Bond poster. And that's a robot. Cool, right? This fantastic little writing convention called WriteOnCon invited me to do a keynote for them. And I actually wrote something and then realized as I was writing it that it would help a lot of people beyond just the scope of the convention. And so they very wonderfully agreed to let me film it for YouTube. Link below to what WriteOnCon is. I highly recommend it. They're a fantastic group of people in convention and super supportive of aspiring authors everywhere. I want to tell you guys about a book that was both the hardest thing I've ever written and also the easiest. This tale begins in 2014. I had just turned in Windwitch to my editor. You know what? Let's back up, actually. Let's go all the way back to 2012 when Something Strange and Deadly first came out. It actually had a different cover back then, and it released to very deeply underwhelming sales. It tanked. Let's just say it. It tanked. And so it was no surprise when the sequels released and had even fewer sales. In fact, in case you've ever noticed, that's why the first book had this beautiful glossy embossed cover, and then all the books after that were just really basic dust jackets. It's because the sales weren't good enough to warrant, something fancy. That's how the business works. So I lived in daily terror for several years of the series being canceled. And shockingly, Harper Teen did not cancel the series, though they really could have. And I'm very grateful to them for not. But when the third book, Strange and Ever After, sold in 2014, or when it came out, it literally had sales in the double digits. For a very, very long time, it remained in the double digits. In fact, I wouldn't be surprised if until the new covers came out, it was still in the double digits. So at that point, my career was essentially toast. Believe it or not, bad sales hurt an author more than no sales. And this is why you will often see authors change their name or take on a pseudonym. It's because they have a higher chance of selling something as an untested debut than they do as an author with a bad track record. So I was at that point. I was going to change my name. I didn't know to what, but I really didn't want to do it because I had developed this pretty substantial online following for my writing advice. So Susan Dennard was super popular for her writing advice. It's just, unfortunately, none of those people who consumed her advice actually bought her books. So I really didn't want to give up my name, but I would have if I had to. Luckily, Tor Teen decided to take a chance on my epic fantasy. Honey, I'm still free. Take a chance on me. For the record, other publishers did not want it. Gonna do my very best and it ain't no lie. You can put me to the test if you let me try. Seriously, give me a chance. One publisher, which I won't name, said that they would only take it if I cut all the points of view but one and made it first person. And then they might be interested. And I didn't want to do that. I wrote this book as epic fantasy in the most adult science fiction fantasy genre sense, but that I knew could skew toward YA. So my editor, the fabulous Whitney Ross, decided to take a chance on my epic fantasy. Honey, I'm still free. Take a chance on me. And I was ecstatic. This was the very end of 2013. I was like, so ecstatic. This was my second chance, my only chance, actually, to turn my career around and get to keep the Susan Dennard name. So I came up with a plan. I was going to self-publish a novella, and it was going to be an entry point into the series, into the Witchlands. It would be set before Truthwitch, and I could offer it at low or even no cost. Then readers who were hooked on Sightwitch would pick up Truthwitch when it came out shortly thereafter. I thought I was brilliant. This plan was fantastic. I did all the research one can do for self-publishing, and I was going to harness the control and the power that came from self-publishing, or independent publishing as it's more commonly known, and I was going to use that to supplement my very sad traditional publishing career. You can cue that laugh track here. You see, although I had a setting, and although I had my characters, Riper and Cullen, I had no story. So actually, fun fact, if you look on the Witchlands map, beep, you can see that the Sightwitch Sister Convent is on the map. And the reason for that is because I had commissioned the map myself, and I was going to use it in the self-published novella, and I needed the location of the story on the map. Sightwitch Sister Convent. I thought I had a story, and I dove in all ready to start writing, but it turns out that just because something makes sense in an outline doesn't mean it works on the actual page. Everything I wrote felt wrong. I started over and over and over and over and over again, countless times. Sometimes I would write just a few lines in a new draft and realize, nah, that doesn't feel right. Other times I'd get several chapters in before I realized this doesn't work. And twice I wrote 30,000 words before I accepted, nope, this just doesn't feel right. For months, 8 months, I spun my wheels and I made no progress. Part of the problem was that I had no real connection to Riper's voice yet. She was a secondary character in Truthwitch, and though she definitely has her own agenda in that book, and I knew what it was, she still hadn't fully formed into a three-dimensional person inside my head. The same held true for Cullen. I just didn't really understand who they were yet, and every story I tried to write from their points of view felt like pulling teeth. I did, at least, have the experience back then to know that when something didn't feel good writing, then the scene is probably wrong. There's a difference, of course, between like being lazy and just not wanting to write, and a scene basically feeling like agony to type and create. That is a sign that the scene just doesn't need to be there, or in this case, basically the entire stories that I was attempting to write. To make it all that much more shameful and painful, like just to add a whole another bucket full of shame icing on the cake, I decided to offer a free writing course that would go alongside my drafting. Write a Book with Suze, it was called. And I was going to share my first draft, all of them, revisions, all those revision rounds that I normally like to do, my outlines, everything. I was going to share it alongside lessons that explained what was going on in my process as well as the craft behind it. It was free, and like 100 people signed up. Actually, it was like 123-ish. That's a pretty specific number, but it was around there. It was a lot. And now you can cue that laugh track again, because I was failing. I was failing, and 123 people got to watch me fail. They witnessed it firsthand. Yeah, I always have a few false starts. That's pretty normal with my process, but this was like a whole nother level. This book just didn't want to be written. And after almost 8 months of that suckage, I gave up. I told everyone in the workshop, I have to stop because I need to write Windwitch, which was true. I had to write the sequel still for Truthwitch. I told my publisher, like, that whole plan I had, you know, the one we even negotiated our contract around, it's not happening. Then I tucked all of my SiteWitch notes and drafts and misery into a drawer where I would never have to face them again. I cannot even express to you guys how embarrassed I was by this whole public failed fiasco, nor can I truly convey how much I hated myself or how much self-doubt reigned supreme over my life during that entire time. This was supposed to be my career-saving move, and I had just face-planted in front of a ton of people before I even left the starting block. We can cue another laugh track right here, because that was only the beginning of the pain and failure. If I had known the deep, dark hole of anxiety that I would soon fall into because of Windwitch, this book right here, I would have thought that the whole SiteWitch thing was super easy. I started working on Windwitch in 2014. I did not finish it until the fall of 2016. That is the longest a book has ever taken me. At least a book that I have worked on every single day. Not like books maybe that I worked on and set aside for years. That's different. But this is a book that I put in the hours for every single day for 2 years. And again, it was the same problem that I had with SiteWitch. I could not find the freaking story. I could not see how all the plot threads, of which there are so many in this series, connected. Everything I had planned no longer felt right. I threw out over 200,000 words. That's like 2 full novels. I stopped counting at 200,000 words because it just got to be too painful. It was so depressing. And I even turned in a first draft, like a finished draft, to my editor in the fall of 2015, only to then 2 weeks later be like, JK, LOL, delete that file, I'm starting over. I don't think she was very happy with me. Looking back, I can see where I went wrong, and I have written at length about this in my newsletter, links below, in case you're curious. But if you had asked me a year ago, was it worth all the heartbreak? I'd have said yes, because Windwitch did ultimately come together, and I'm really proud of this book, but I would have gladly traded all of the misery and heartbreak and deep self-loathing for an easier, faster book. If you ask me today, was it worth it? I will say yes, resoundingly yes. The reason being that not only did I learn so much about my creative process, so much so that I have completely transformed the way I write, another link below, but also because 3 years after I started, I actually managed to write SiteWitch. Managed is an understatement. That book erupted from me, and it was hands down one of the most joyous creative experiences of my life. After 3 years of letting the story simmer and grow and connect in my subconscious brain, I now understood who Ryber was. I had a clear idea of the world and how all of the story arcs and the history wove together. I saw how to take the SiteWitch sister convent, the setting itself, to a whole new level in depth. Basically, everything that I had tried to wring from my brain in 2014 was now there and ready for the writing. Because of that experience, I finally learned that simmer time was key to my process. I'd heard that advice and even given it before in the past, but I definitely did not fully comprehend the extent to which my own muse, my own subconscious brain, relied upon it. Looking back, I can see that Windwitch came together a year and a half after I started working on it. In other words, after 1.5 years of letting ideas simmer, the muse was ready. And the last and final version of that book, the one that's in here, which is so different from all of the false starts and the version I turned into my editor, that actually came together quite quickly. And WriteOnCon was no different, except I'd had even more simmering time. So I wrote that story even faster, and I loved every second. Now, as I pick away at Bloodwitch, which is the next book in the series, I'm trying to lean into what I've learned about my muse, my subconscious brain, and my process. Rather than attempt to write every day, as I always used to do, I move through 3 phases, from creative input and vague sort of brainstorming to outlining and more concrete brainstorming to then the actual writing of words. Then I circle back again whenever the words peter out. The Witchland series as a whole requires much more simmering time than my first series did, which makes sense considering the sheer difference in scale and complexity between the two. But I've learned to embrace this. And instead of falling into a panic every time I get stuck, I now know that the key and the solution is simply to step away and trust that my subconscious mind is working even if I don't realize it. In fact, it's doing all the heavy lifting and will eventually provide the answer I'm looking for. I have also learned to accept that, at least with this particular series, I will never be a fast writer, and that's okay. At the end of the day, I would rather write the right story and love every second doing it than try to conform to a multi-book-a-year model that I envy, but I will never be. There's no shame in being slow. There's no shame in being fast. There's no shame in not writing every day, nor in writing every day. And there's definitely no shame in needing or even asking for heaps and heaps of simmering time for your projects. Everybody creates differently, and enjoying the ride is what matters most in the end, which I realize that sounds like such a cliche, but it's only now 5-6 books in that I actually realize it's true. And that, my friends, is what WriteOnCon taught me. And that's why it's been both the hardest and the easiest book that I've ever written. And I wouldn't go back and change a single day of all that heartbreak. So I hope you guys enjoy it. Thank you for listening. And if you like what I had to say, then definitely subscribe to my newsletter below for more like this. Also, be sure to check out WriteOnCon, link below. And thank you to the people at WriteOnCon for inviting me to do this and giving me a chance to really talk about my deep struggles and failure so that maybe other people can learn from them.